many of those as a student. So this is interactive. So any questions you have, please feel free to interrupt me. I will not be offended. Like I said, I can't actually see you. So if you have your like hand virtually raised, I can't see it right now. So feel free just to interrupt and be like, Matt, stop talking. So um, I also have some articles to share with y'all. Being pre-health students, I wanted to tailor this a little bit more towards what you're doing and some of the disparities the LGBTQ plus community they face, especially the trans community, when it comes to health services and insurance. Um, and today actually is International Transgender Day of Visibility. So I'll share some resources for that as well. It's a day to be for anybody that can be visible. Of course, visibility is not a requirement. To show, proudly who they are, and for allies like myself to support the trans community. I'm the G in LGBT plus, but that doesn't negate the fact that I need to be an ally to trans people, to bi people, to lesbians, genderqueer, anybody how they identify. And then lastly, I'm gonna be dropping some things in y'all's chat, some terminology. That's one of the biggest questions I get, especially for a health student. You might have someone that comes in and says, I identify as gender fluid, um, coming out to their doctor, to their health professional, and a lot of our health professionals saying like, I don't really know exactly what that means, what it doesn't mean. So I'll drop in some terminology as well that might be helpful to y'all. So like I said, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to interrupt me. I will not be mad. So just some community expectations. I always feel weird doing these online, but I feel like it's helpful to say just a couple of notes. This, like I said, is not a lecture. I'm not trying to change your heart or your mind. I would love to give you some inclusive tips, especially going into the field that you're all going into, whatever role that you choose to do. And let me also make this note, because you mentioned like there was an OChem exam, and it's also kind of that point in the semester where you're like, oh gosh, spring break is over. There's no more breaks really until we end school. So you might be completely burnt out right now, especially with the Zoom, Microsoft Teams world. So feel free to speak up if you want to, but if you're in more of a listening mode, I totally honor that, and I will not call you out to speak. I'm not that kind of speaker. Um, and then we're all here to learn and grow. So this is a chance for you to respectfully make a mistake, not intentionally, of course, but if you say the wrong thing, I'm not going to shame you, but I will help you with inclusive language. So to get things started, I don't know everybody here, so I don't know what you know and what you don't know. There might be members of the community in our presentation today. There might be just allies or people wanting to be allies. But let's start with the acronym. So one of the questions I get the most questions of is, do I say LGBT plus? Do I say LGBTQ plus? Do I say the queer community? So this is where my opinion comes in, and I invite other people to share their opinions. As a member of the community, I will typically say the LGBTQ plus community, even though this on the screen says LGBT plus. The reason why you see LGBT plus the most is what the government uses or doesn't use in some cases. It's the most common of the acronym. Now we always add the plus to show people that we recognize that there are more identities other than just the 4 letters of LGBT. But there is a movement which I really love and support of saying the word queer, to capture gender identity, gender expression, and sexual orientation. So my advice, this is where my advice comes into you. If you don't know somebody, or if you don't have a relationship with them and you don't know how they feel about the word queer, although a reclaimed term, I would shy away from that word until you know how that person feels. So if you know they're in the community, don't walk up to them and say, as a member of the queer community, or are you queer, or since you're queer, that might rub them the wrong way depending on the person. Now, saying LGBTQ plus community typically is a good catch-all to see how somebody feels. Now, my first ally tip, if you will, is always mirror the language that the person or the patient in your case, or the friend, the colleague uses, because that is in itself an ally tool. It's showing the person that you're listening, which everybody loves to be listened to and heard. And number 2, that you are using the language that they use, and you are putting it into practice. So if I go up to you and I say, I'm gender fluid, you could also go back to that person and say, well, since you identify as gender fluid, what disparities have you seen in the healthcare system? That's showing them that, like, you might not know what gender fluid means, but it's showing that you're honoring that that's their identity. So that is my opinion, but I would love to hear other people if you have opinions on this or experience. I want to allow some time and unmute yourself if you do, because I can't see you. It's okay if you don't. Okay. We will move on. So, like I told you, I'm going to be listing some terminology in the chat. My biggest piece of advice, we live in the age of Google, right? We live, let me make sure that I'm still plugged in. Can y'all still see my screen?
Yes. Yes, we can.
Okay, good. I got nervous for a minute. I was like, did my internet disconnect? And I didn't know it. Okay, good. Just kidding. Back to where we were. So you'll notice that I cite the Human Resources Campaign quite often. Now, this is a resource that I highly suggest that you utilize, especially being a member of the healthcare system in the future, or currently for a lot of you. Terminology is ever changing. And the Human Rights Campaign has, in my opinion, done a very great job of listing a glossary of terms that is very helpful. Now, I won't insult your amazing intelligence by reading these definitions to you, but typically we think we know a definition, and when you read the definition, you're like, oh, that's not exactly how I would have said it. Someone that identifies as bisexual, even though the word bi, meaning two, is in the title of the identity, doesn't necessarily mean that they're attracted to just men and women. We have to recognize that there are more than just two genders. And that's why you'll hear me a lot say people's gender identities instead of just saying gender. Being in the health field, that people typically mix up sex assigned at birth with gender identity. We see all those gender reveal parties where people have like the pink balloons popping out of a box and they say it's a girl. Um, those are really sex assigned at birth parties, if you want to be honest, because we don't know the baby's gender identity yet. And the biggest way you'll find out someone's gender identity is when they tell you. We can't assume their gender identity based on how they look. I remember my grandpa used to say very harmful things. He would assume people's sexual orientation and gender identity just based on their haircuts or the clothes that they were wearing. And it was really painful to sit and listen to those because for many people like my grandpa, there are the gender boxes, as I like to call them. The pink box and the blue box. Pink somehow, somewhere along the lines, got assigned to girls and women, and blue got assigned to boys and men. So, you know, when you go into Target or to a store and see the toys that they offer or even the clothes that they have, we typically see, especially in the baby section, blue and pink, blue and pink. And even the designs on the clothes, dinosaurs for boys, girls get baby dolls or Barbies, that those kinds of designs, we automatically assign gender to people and put them in those gender boxes. So what happens when you don't fit into a gender box? For instance, the term transgender down here. This is an umbrella term. I am going to read this one, even though I said I wasn't. An umbrella term for people whose gender identity and or expression is different from cultural expectations based on the sex they were assigned at birth. So the reason I really gravitate towards this specific definition is the terms cultural expectations. Now, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I was born in the United States, and I have a very Americanized view of gender and sex just based on our own society. But the beautiful thing about UT Dallas, it's very much a melting pot. People from all countries, all different cultures, um, racial and ethnic backgrounds that are different than mine. So it's beautiful to see how other people interpret these things. It is important to note as well, while I'm on my soapbox, that there are different laws in different countries associated with these identities. Last week, the Student Counseling Center and I did a session supporting our Asian American and Pacific Islander and Asian students, you know, especially in the moment we're in, that identify in the queer community. And we went through a list of countries and the actual laws they have on the books for LGBTQ plus people, and they were sickening to read. I mean, legal to kill somebody that identifies as they said same-sex attracted. That just gives you an eye opener of how we in our world talk about gender and sex. So at this time, I want to show you a video because I don't know about y'all, but I hate when speakers just look at slides. So I don't want to do that to you. So I'm going to pull up a video that I think is really helpful, and I hope that you find helpful as well. Let me get this all situated. All right, let's see if it works. So this video is another tip that I would love for you to have in your back pocket. Now, I'm very visual, so this really helps me, but there is a series of animated videos. So the good thing about animation is kind of it can speak to younger crowds as well to describe topics that we want them to know about. So this particular video from the Amaze series is called Range of Gender Identities, and it follows a family with a friend coming over for dinner and how we talk about them. So I'm going to play this, and if the sound doesn't work, just interrupt me.
All right, folks, here we go. A romaine and kale salad with avocado, cucumber, shishito peppers, and 4 kinds of cheese, sprinkled in balsamic straight from Italy.
Wow! In my day, salads only had 2 ingredients. A rock-hard wedge of iceberg lettuce and a stinky old dried-up tomato.
Sorry, guys. I'm gonna have to eat fast. Alex is stopping by in a few minutes to work on our robotics project.
Alex, is that the girl with that weird dog or the boy with the hat with the wings that flap?
No, Uncle Jay. This is Alex.
Oh, okay. I remember. A very nice young... Come to think of it, well, is Alex a boy or a girl?
Actually, Alex doesn't define themselves as boy or girl.
What else is there?
Back in your day, most people understood the world in terms of just boys and girls. But now, we know gender is more complex than that.
Wait, aren't we just talking about whether you're born with a or a hee?
When you're born, your sex is assigned in a medical way, but the sex listed on your birth certificate may not necessarily match your gender identity.
Gender identity is a person's inner experience of who they are in terms of gender, their deep personal sense of being male, female, a blend of both, or neither.
And while many people have a gender identity that's the same as their assigned birth sex of female or male, that's not always the case, because gender exists on a spectrum. Like transgender, which means a person whose gender identity is not consistent with their assigned birth sex. Non-binary, which means a person whose identity doesn't fall in the category of either male or female. And genderqueer or gender fluid, which means a person who does not identify themselves as having a specific gender at all.
Does gender identity have to do with being straight or gay?
Actually, no. Gender identity has to do with the way you feel about yourself, while sexual orientation is based on the way you feel toward others, the people you may or may not be attracted to.
You know, I really like Alex, and I can tell they're a good friend to you. But I'm still pretty confused about all of this.
That's okay. You don't have to fully understand someone to respect them. To start, try not to make any assumptions about a person's gender, and use the name and pronouns that they ask you to. Above all, be a friend or ally for people of all gender identities.
That's right, Mom. Oh, Alex is here. Come on in.
Hey, everyone.
Oh, hey, Alex. Care for some salad? The balsamic's right from Italy, you know.
So I hope you enjoyed that video. I think that's a pretty incredible video to just show you the uncle, I believe that's what he was referred to in the video. He was presented with new information and immediately put it into practice when Alex came over. So the reason I love that video is because we live in a world of stereotypes. So I have fallen into the stereotype myself of thinking, older generations are so resistant to learning new terminology and language, so they won't put it into practice. But as we saw in that video, the uncle actually immediately did. So there's hope for everybody. I think that was a good message to show that, just because we have been taught something for so long, or spoon-fed a steady diet of what gender and sexual orientation really are, that we can change, and when we're presented with new information, we can move forward and use that. I wonder if anybody has any thoughts on the video or anything we've presented so far. No worries. I'm looking at the chat. I want yellow and green. Babies deserve to be fashionable too. That is so true. We, my husband and I are foster parents. So, by the way, speaking of healthcare systems, we have experienced some interesting things. But it's true, when we are buying things for our kids, it's a social experiment in itself, finding so many gendered things. And an example, this is not healthcare related at all, but I took my son to go get his haircut this past Saturday because it was getting long and wanted to get his haircut. And the person cutting his hair, she kept looking at me, and I was like, oh gosh, do I have something on my face? Because I usually do. But I was like, what's going on? She was like, oh, that's so nice of you. And I said, what's so nice of me? She goes, you gave your wife the day off today, and you took your son to get his haircut. That's so nice. And I had a moment where I was just like, I literally teach this stuff for a living. Do I speak up? And I'm going to be honest, I was so tired that day. We had taken our girls to play therapy, which is a great resource. They woke up really early. I was so tired, and I thought to myself, it's not even worth it right now. And I just smiled. And I think about people in the healthcare system that get some of the same assumptions that I know I've had. Oh, are you sexually active with your girlfriend? And I'm like, I don't have a girlfriend. I'm like, how do I navigate this? So when we make assumptions about people, it's painful and it's awkward. Does anybody else have thoughts about the video or anything?
I just wanted to say on the baby clothes thing, I wanted to comment on the video as well. I really like children. I want to go into pediatrics and maybe neonatology. I don't know yet. I really like babies, and I've always found this issue. I also really like lions, but lions don't come in blue, and they don't come in pink either. And so it's really hard to find like cute animal clothes that also, well, it's just really hard to find cute animal clothes. That's neither here nor there, though. But I really liked in the video that whenever the uncle, I think you said, was presented, or whenever the person came in, they said, oh, hi. They said hi, and they said, hi, Alex. They didn't use their pronouns. They didn't know. Well, he didn't use the person's pronouns because he didn't know what their pronouns were, I assume. Or maybe he just said, oh, hi, Alex. And I'm putting too much effort into that. But I just thought it was nice that he didn't assume what the person's pronouns were.
I love what you said. And is your name Lane? I want to make sure I don't. The thing I hate about Microsoft Teams is that it puts people's names. You can't edit your name yet like you can on Zoom. So I'm always weird about calling people's names out. So Lane, thank you for that. It's true. I know, working in the gender center, there's times when I might not know someone's pronouns. And, a rule of thumb that I use is to use they, them until I know. Now, some people do use they, them as their pronouns. But I will say, and this is also just my opinion, this isn't like a mandate, but I typically do that until I know someone's pronouns, because especially in like a classroom setting, the last thing that I want to do is create a space that's not inclusive, which I have accidentally done before. And you got to acknowledge it and move forward. Thank you for sharing that. There's another comment in the chat that I think is really great. Ignorance seems to be a major issue. How do we get more people, including those involved in healthcare, to understand health-related issues faced by the LGBTQ+ community? So it's like we planned this. Thank you so much for asking that really thoughtful question, because I have a resource that I want to share with y'all, and let's see if it works. It's not right now, so I'll just share this part of my screen. Can y'all see the Healthcare Equality Index 2020, hopefully?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Okay, good. Okay, so this particular resource is also from the Human Rights Campaign. So hrc.org, if you ever want to look up anything, especially healthcare related, I would encourage you to go to their website and just go to their search engine and type in healthcare. They do a healthcare equality index every single year. I haven't seen the 2021 version quite yet, but this particular equality index is promoting equitable and inclusive care for LGBTQ plus patients and their families. So the reason why this resource is so incredibly important, it actually, here I'm going to scroll and show you this. They list information if patients or people in general are just looking for resources, or if you as the healthcare provider are trying to be more inclusive. For instance, resources for serving transgender patients. So this particular resource is really great because it gives you, yes, I will accept the cookies. Never know what cookies are. It has different surveys. It has different transgender affirming hospital policies. It has general information, as you can see right here, a report of National Transgender Discrimination Survey. So let me say this, if you're ever talking to someone that maybe says something that isn't true, such as, oh, trans people don't face discrimination, you could be like, really? Click and see exactly the great survey that was put together by the National Center for Transgender Equality and actually show them data. This is the full report. If you really want to say that, we as especially US students, professors, healthcare officials, people love data. You are in a field where data is key. So this is a study that really talks about, let's read this one together. 63% of participants experience serious acts of discrimination, even the events that would be a major impact on a person's quality of life and the ability to sustain themselves financially or emotionally, or both. Participants reported these, what they had faced here: loss of job, eviction, school bullying, teacher bullying, physical assault due to bias. So look at these different bullet points here, and a couple of them land someone in a hospital, right? Physical assault, sexual assault. There are quite a few things, and then mental health issues as well. Look at these and think as yourself, even if you're not in the trans community, how would this affect you? A loss of a job. Well, if you lose your job, you lose a lot of things almost automatically. You lose your paychecks, which means you can't buy food. You can't maybe pay for school like you had been with your job. Then you don't become a student anymore, and then you lose your housing. Here is a not so good fact about Dallas and Collin County that you might not know about. So the line for campus runs right in the middle. So the front half of campus is in Dallas County. The back half of campus is in Collin County. So why is that important? So before I say all this, just know that UT Dallas supports and defends all LGBTQ plus people, and I'll show you the policy later that actually backs that up. But why it's important: say you're a pre-health student and you're like, you know what, I really need to get an internship or a job, to make sure that's on my resume, and also I need a job because I need to eat. So you go up to, Plano to go work at a great hospital. Now, depending on the hospital, depending on who owns it and who are the gatekeepers, if you will, Collin County, you can get evicted for being LGBTQ plus. I don't know if you knew that. Evicted from your apartment, from your housing. You can also be fired for being LGBTQ plus. Now, there is a new Supreme Court case that came out saying you cannot do that. So we live in the land of loopholes. We are in the great state of Texas. Although I love this state, when it comes to LGBTQ plus people, especially in the healthcare field, we have a lot of bills, a lot of current bills in the current legislative session that are essentially allowing a religious exemption to not serve LGBTQ plus patients. It just passed in Arkansas. Just so you know, it is live in Texas right now. There is a bill that has been presented for doctors, nurses, healthcare professionals, anybody in that field to reject services, saying, I'm not going to serve you because you violate my religious protections. Now, I don't remember who said this. It was a professor at UTD, and I thought it was beautiful. And it was in the pre-health field. Basically said, if you go into the pre-health field, you have to be willing to serve anybody and everybody, because everybody needs health services, right? And maybe that's another training, but healthcare, people have accidents. People need to go see a doctor. People need to go see a nurse. Like, there's so many instances where we need access. Now, if you go to somebody and they say, sorry, I can't serve you, even though we can make the argument, oh, well, that's the right, that's the law, this or that, let's bring it back to the person. Think about a person that desperately needs medical services and is told no. That is horrible, right? We are putting that person in the line of, or right in harm's way, if you will, especially if they need immediate medical attention. So just be aware of the laws that exist where you live. So if you live in Collin County, for instance, I just moved from Dallas County to Collin County. I mentioned loopholes earlier. So we live in Texas, where it's an at-will state, meaning you can be fired at the drop of a hat and they don't need to give you an excuse. That's what at-will means. Now, that becomes an issue because even though there is a Supreme Court case that essentially protects people, that are LGBTQ plus in the workplace, there's so many loopholes where people can say, oh, that's not why they got fired. I didn't fire them because they were gay. I just needed to fire them. So that's why I want you all to be aware of why it's so important to look at these laws and to look at an employer before you decide to work for them. Because you might be in a case where, they say, sorry, we have the right to not serve, and that's what we're going to do. Now, I just dropped in the chat the resource that I was sharing with you from Human Rights Campaign. I would encourage you on your own time, or even now, to click around and look at the different resources. This is a pretty beautiful set of resources. If you're a patient that's LGBTQ plus, or if you're a provider. So take a look at that. And sorry, that was a very long-winded answer to your great question, but I just wanted y'all to be aware of what's going on, because it affects people's mental health and physical health. Yeah, of course. So I want to share one more video with you, because this is the part of the presentation that I realized that I totally forgot to introduce myself at the beginning, so I apologize. So my name is Matt Windsor-Johns. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm the Assistant Director for LGBT plus programs in our Gender Center. So you'll notice that I immediately said my pronouns, although not a requirement, and not a requirement for anyone to disclose their pronouns. It does show a way of solidarity, especially to our trans and non-binary communities that are constantly misgendered. So I had someone in my life recently that identifies as lesbian, and she told me, why are you always saying your pronouns, or why is it on your email signature? We all know you're a he. And it gave me a moment of like, okay, just because you're in the LGBTQ plus community doesn't mean you know everything. So I get a false sense of security to think like, oh, everybody in our community supports trans people, or Black people, or trans people of color, or queer people of color. That is an assumption on my part that people still, there's a lot of education to be had, even for myself. So the reason I'm telling you that is it's important to talk to other people that are in the LGBTQ plus community other than just one person. Although I'm gay, I'm also a white cisgender man, and I have a lot of privilege If privilege was a mountain, I'd be pretty high at the top. So access to services, access to a lot of things are granted to me just based on how I look. And they might not even know that I'm gay, and they might give me services or even give me a job or not fire me because they might not know that I'm gay. So I'm going to show you a video that I think that is pretty helpful. And this particular video, I don't know if you've heard of Soul Pancake. I think that is the weirdest name, but it is the coolest set of videos. They have different series on, it's the How You See Me series. This particular series looks at different minority groups and lets people from those groups tell you their own opinions and how they feel and how they identify. So there's one on women. Today is the last day of Women's History Month. I would encourage you to listen to that one. But for now, we're going to watch the LGBTQ one, and then I'll get your reactions right afterwards.
My mom, when I told her I was gay, actually took me to like a psychiatrist. And I remember coming out and the psychiatrist being like, "There's nothing wrong with your daughter. She's perfectly healthy." And I was like, "Yeah." And my mom was like, "No."
Watching TV, you see a lot of, fairy tales, and you see men and women getting married. You hear it in songs. Just everything. You're surrounded by like hetero norms. So I was really trying to mold myself into what a straight man looks like. A lot of it's kind of a blur because I was trying to be someone other than me.
It was just like kind of like a transition from like, I'm a tomboy to like, oh, I'm like really, really different.
I had a best girlfriend, a friend that's a girl who's my best friend. And about the same time that I came out, she did as well. And it was just really helpful to have two people doing that at the same time, and it kind of brought us closer together.
Even when I was coming out, like, I still had the things that I've heard from like friends and family growing up about, gay people. There were still those attitudes left over in my mind, so I had to like really educate myself and immerse myself into that community and that world.
I've been more comfortable with talking about it, but it's still not something that I'll come out and say, "Hi, I'm Jen, I'm bi." One of my closest friends, I had been talking to her about how I had been dating a girl, and I really thought she was really cute, but I also liked a guy too, and she said, she got really fed up with me, and she said, "Well, you have to pick sometime, like whichever one you're gonna be with. What does their gender have to do with how I feel about them?"
When people find out you're gay, like it raises something in them. They feel endangered. They want to change you.
And I've even had a priest once in high school tell me that, I need to redeem my life in my sociology class in front of the whole class. And I had an argument with him. Speaking up for myself publicly was a really, really empowering moment for me at such a young age.
There are so many different colors on the LGBTQ spectrum. There's trans, there's, lesbians, bi, gender fluid, gender queer. There's so many subgenres of like, people that exist in our community.
At the end of the day, I really had to accept that there wasn't really a single subculture that was gonna define me. I had to accept that I was made of all of these things and that all of these identities don't necessarily make me.
Be accepting of yourself, even though other people might not do it. Maybe I lost a few Facebook friends over it, but at the end of the day, that's okay.
How you feel is not what everyone says that you are. I know that sounds a little confusing.
You're gonna have to own it. You're gonna have to get your spoon, and you're gonna have to dig down deep and be like, all these layers are mine. And the sooner you do it, the sooner you'll really know yourself.
So, like I said, there's a lot of great videos that I would encourage you to watch when you can. But what I really want to focus on the remainder of our time today is just making sure that you have the resources that you need. And I want to hear from some of you if you want to talk, not a requirement, I swear. But what did you think about that video? What stuck out to you particularly about that video? And you can either utilize the chat and I can read that on your behalf, or you can unmute yourself and go for it.
I do want to say, this isn't in relation to the video specifically, but what you said in regards to
have religious having religious orientation be a barrier to LGBT patients getting appropriate health care. And that sort of reminds me of how I was reading a book called My Own Country, which talks about HIV patients in the 80s. And back then, when a member of a gay couple is in the hospital, if they're hospitalized as a patient, then their partner is not really considered either a next of kin or an appropriate decision maker in that relationship at all. And I know that there's like this one specific story of a patient who was in the hospital and his partner couldn't even visit him, let alone decide what was best for the partner. It was his family instead who had to decide because they were related by blood. So I know that in 2010, the HHS had issued regulations to allow for visitation policies to extend to gay couples, but that's still relatively new. It's only about a decade since that's passed, and I don't know if there's any like changes to that since then, since it's 2021. But that's something that I've been thinking about since you talked about that Supreme Court ruling.
I'm so personally glad that you brought up that situation. So I mentioned that I have a husband and we are legally married, and which is incredible, and I'm so thankful. And I'll tell you why that's so important on paper that we're married. But we actually met in 2015, the end of 2015. But June 2015 is when same-sex marriage was actually legalized. And I keep thinking, like, there's so many moments where I'm just like, if we weren't legally married, there are so many situations, especially in the healthcare field, that we couldn't have had access to each other if we were married. I'll give you a specific example. This is not even a lie. I swear it sounds such like a lie. So I was on campus at UTD, and this was 2018. I was doing this exact presentation for our EMT students. So giving them, some LGBT tips, all those things, and my stomach kept hurting. And I remember thinking, this is like a weird hurt that I haven't experienced like ever. It didn't feel right. So I kept ignoring it, and throughout the training it kept getting worse. And I live for laughter because it's the only way I get through life. But I remember laughing to myself. I was like, well, if something happens to me, I'm with all these EMT students, so I guess what better place to be. But at the end of that training, I usually like stick around, answer questions, but I was like, I've got to go by. They probably thought I was so weird. I called my husband. I was like, I'm that person, by the way, that like will ignore things because I don't want to go to the doctor or hospital. He knew I was serious. I was like, I think you have to meet me at the ER. He was like, what? I was like, yeah, something's not right with my stomach. Go to the ER, and it gets progressively worse. Turns out that I had to have an emergency appendectomy to get my appendix out because it was, sorry, this is like TMI, but it was about to rupture. I guess this is not TMI to a healthcare group, but I I was within hours of it rupturing, which, as you all know, would have been an even bigger issue. But I remember my husband going in the room with me, and I remember so many times, even though the staff was so great and they were so kind, they would like look at Brian, my husband, and be like, "Oh, are you a friend? Are you brother? Are you?" And I would interrupt because I was like in a bad mood. I'd be like, "He's my husband. He's allowed to be here." And they're like, "Oh, yeah, 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 yeah." But I was so defensive because I knew if we weren't legally married, he wouldn't have been allowed back in the room with me because it was family only. They kept saying family only, family only. Is he family? And I would say, yes, he's my husband. I can't run into my house right now and get our marriage certificate, but I'm sure I can find. And they're like, no, 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 no. But the looks, I'll never forget the looks that we got. And they weren't even judgy. It was like, oh, there's a protocol here and I need to do something to dismiss him from the room. So it was really hard and it was upsetting. Oh, my kids just got home. I know, hold on, I'm teaching real quick. Okay, good. My kids just got home. So hold on, I'm teaching. So I want to put something in the chat right here that is the glossary. Hello. The glossary of terms that I was talking about. If you ever encounter a patient or somebody that says, a term about themselves that you might not understand, here is a helpful tip to hopefully, no, Diet Dr. Pepper's for adults, not for kids. Speaking of pre-health, I know we'll get you a juice. So, baby, I'm teaching. No, sorry, y'all. Real life happening. Real life. Okay, go over there real quick. Real life happening. We're
Zoom
foster parents.
University.
You want to come sit? You can sit. So we are foster parents, which, by the way, there's disparities there as well. She is drinking Diet Dr. Pepper, making me look like a great parent right now. Awesome. Okay, so I think this is pretty much my cue to end the presentation. But thank you so much for having me. If you need any resources, I want to put my information here in the chat. So you always can email me, and hopefully the resources I put in the chat are helpful to you. If you ever need me, I am here for you, and I want to make sure that your experience as a UT Dallas student, especially going into the health field, is a great one, and I'm here to support you for real. Any more questions before I sign off? I'm so sorry to sign off a little bit early, as you can see.
No worries. Thank you so much for your presentation. Like, we really, really appreciate it. If anyone from the audience wanted to like type in anything in the chat, any questions y'all have, feel free. Lane, I don't know if you wanted to comment with something, but go for it.
Yes, I did have a question, but we've got 2 people typing in the chat, so I'll wait till they send in their questions before I ask mine. Never mind. It looks like one of them stopped typing. Okay, so I had a question actually. As doctors or future physicians, how can we support patients in the LGBTQ plus community who haven't come out to their parents but still need the support of their family?
Oh, I am actually really glad that you said this question. You just made me think of a resource that I did not give y'all. It's basically from Human Rights Campaign, coming out to your doctor, and depending on the identity, I would say even having a rainbow pin. So I'll give you a good example. I just told you that we're foster parents, and our doctor has a rainbow pin on her badge, and I straight up just asked her because I was like, "Oh, what is this?" She was like, "Oh, I'm an ally, but I want people to know, that they can be their authentic selves with me." So that pin just let me know that I can say even the word, "My husband's not here right now, but we have a question." Even saying it just like that, let me be my full self in that training. Now, if you have a mandate where you can't have anything, any swag or anything, here are some resources that maybe you can have available or print it out. And it's called Coming Out to Your Doctor. And this particular resource, if you click on it, actually has coming out to your doctor, and also with whatever identity that you do have, how to have that conversation. I remember telling you at the very beginning of the presentation, having to say to my doctor, "I don't have a girlfriend," and I was okay, Victoria. Thank you. Go in there. So my daughter is very into girlfriend and boyfriend talk right now, so she is obsessed with that. So when I had to come out to my doctor, I was filled with such anxiety because I didn't know how they felt, right? I didn't know how they voted, how they thought about queer people. But I decided to do something on the phone when I'm booking an appointment. I will say, are they queer inclusive? I looked at different things online to see if they accept LGBTQ plus patients. If I called up there and they had no idea what I was talking about, I got my answer. But even having a little rainbow pin on your badge was a huge thing for me, going into the doctor. I hope that was helpful. But the resources I just put in the chat, even printing them out, coming out to your doctor lets people know I'm a safe person that you can come out to.
Okay, that's
Thank
awesome.
you for that question. Yeah.
Of course.
And one question for me as well, since we are pre-health currently, and we are undergraduate students, what is something that we could like use in our volunteering and the fields we work in now, or even just on students on campus, to start fostering inclusion, and what kind of resources that does the Gender Center have to help us like kind of understand more?
I'm so glad that you said that. So we created a pocket resource guide that is for everybody on campus to know how to talk about these issues, but also seek services. And I just put this in here in the chat. This resource guide actually also talks about our inclusive student health insurance that students can access if they're seeking, you know, gender affirmation surgeries, HRT. Um, this is something that you can pass out and distribute, or even I put it in my email signature to show people, you know, I'm a safe person to talk to. If you need resources, this is what we offer. And then lastly, we have different events in the Gender Center that I feel like would be really helpful tools for everyone to learn. So I want to put in the chat here. Let me find it. So if you go to gendercenter.utdallas.edu, we have a list of our LGBT plus programs. And more importantly, what I want to show you all, we have something called QTs, which stand for Queer Tea. We have different topics once a month where we talk about how to be inclusive in the field that you're in, how to come out to your doctor. This upcoming one, let me see if it's in here yet. We just had the role non-menstruators have in achieving menstrual equity. So we talk about inclusive language for menstruating. Instead of saying women and girls have periods, that's not exactly true. There's more gender identities that have their period. So learning inclusive language like that will give people tips and clues that you are a person that they can talk to. But keep in contact with us. I'm going to put our website here in the chat so you can stay connected, and then follow us on our social media because we're always posting articles. We're always talking about different events that we have coming up. And then lastly, I do want to say this. We have Lavender graduation coming up, which is open to LGBTQ plus people and allies. In this particular program, if you're graduating this semester or in the summertime, we want to celebrate you with a rainbow cord and some other fun swag that we have. So it's not too late to sign up. That a virtual event is May 4th, which is right around the corner. Here is the information if you want to sign up for that. Thank you for your thoughtful questions and listening to me. And for real, y'all, I am a resource for you at all times. I love that GIF in the chat. Feel free to reach out to me. There are no dumb questions. Whatever I can do to support you, I am here to do that. Thank you all so much.
All right, thank you so much, Matt. Again, this has been really, really informational. So thank you for everything you do. I'll see you at Lavender graduation.
Yeah, I'm so glad. Awesome.
Thank you so
Well,
much
thank
for
y'all
coming.
so much. Have a great night.
You
You
too.
too.
Bye.
And for our AMSA members, please stay on. We do have some announcements for you all. So we'll get started with those slides soon enough. No worries. No worries, Shruti. I got it. So we just have a couple of slides to go over, just some announcements for what AMSA is planning for the rest of this semester. We are almost done, so oh my goodness, it's reaching the end. Let me see if I can present this because my technology skills are not the best right now.
Stephanie, I can do a screen share for it if you want me to.
Okay, that would be perfect.
Hold on, let me get it pulled up right here. Da-da-da-da. Mine's not the best either. You might hear my fans whirring in the background on my 2013 MacBook Air.
No worries.
Right. Can y'all see the still loading presentation?
All right, perfect. All right, so thank you guys again for joining us for our Gender Center workshop today for LGBT 101. I think it's really informational to know, since as future healthcare workers and people that are going to be taking care of patients, it's important to be as inclusive as you can. Honestly, I had no idea about the Supreme Court hearing about turning patients away. So that was really surprising, since I considered if you are going to be a doctor or a nurse or another healthcare profession, you should have like unconditional empathy towards your patients. So seeing that was a thing really, really surprised me. It's also just good to know what kind of obstacles we face and what kind of hurdles we should be aware of as healthcare workers. Alrighty, so we just have some announcements for you all. If Lane, you could go to the next slide, we'll go more into detail about that. And Avirut, you can take this away.
Yes, hi. So we have a list of volunteering opportunities that are on our website. There's like a whole PDF that you've probably seen before, and you should go check it out again if you want to go find some good volunteer opportunities during this time. Some of the highlights of what we have are the Red Cross, and then there's a virtual crisis helpline at 7 Cups. And of course, if you want to do in-person volunteering, the North Texas Food Bank is great for that. And also, we'll keep emailing you periodically with a list of new volunteering opportunities as they come as well. And as far as virtual conferences for research opportunities go, once more, these are on our website under opportunities and research. There's some really interesting ones about COVID, and then just some general biology ones, some healthcare and global health ones as well, if that's what you're into. You can sign up for all of these through our website, and they'll be included in our next emails as well.
Hi, so we have some interesting things that have been happening in the news. So scientists at the University of Virginia have identified a potential way to head off heart attacks and strokes by strengthening fibrous caps that overlay plaques that naturally accumulate inside our arteries. Something that you may know is that the unstable ones typically cause heart attacks and strokes. So this study that was done supports recent findings that certain types of inflammation might actually help stabilize plaques. Our bodies tend to create protective caps over these lesions and prevent them from triggering serious major blood clots, which in the case of the heart or the brain can cause either a heart attack or a stroke. Interestingly, multiple cell types are involved in this process and not just smooth muscle cells as was previously thought. Taking these new results into consideration with certain clinical trials that have been done has shown little to no benefit in anti-inflammatory therapies. And the University of Virginia team is currently urging pharmaceutical companies to rethink their approaches to preventing heart attacks and strokes. So I just wanted to hear your opinions on this. As we've seen in the last year, the major focus of healthcare and medicine has been on the pandemic, from trying to understand the coronavirus to coming up with a vaccine to educating the public on the importance of social distancing and the fact that there are so many different variants out there. That being said, there's also a lot of advancement that has been done in other sectors, which hasn't really been receiving ample coverage. I wanted to hear your thoughts and opinions on the way things have been covered in the media, social media. This could be related to COVID or other things. And once again, there's no right or wrong answer. I just want to hear your opinions and on how things have been covered. And if you don't really feel comfortable, feel free typing it in the chat.
So I can start it off with my own thoughts about just how social media and other news sources cover healthcare issues. I feel, along with everyone else, I feel that COVID has just taken such a huge, drastic effect on our just daily lives, from having a lockdown that affected us from having our lives just go on like normal, to stay at home for long periods of time and worried about getting infected from your closest families and friends with this virus that has had a lot of cases and a lot of deaths. So it makes sense as to why the media would focus so much on COVID-19 specifically, especially when that's when everyone's worried about. So it's worth, that's where the money is, really. It's worth to talk about those things. But Shruti, you're right. There is still many, many issues in the other realms of healthcare that should still be covered. It should still be talked about and thought about, like with the atherosclerotic plaques and other research in terms of that. I think another example of that too would be the rise in Ebola cases as well in Africa, where they found some new cases in Ebola. I think it was either in 2020 or early 2021. That's kind of came up in Papua New Guinea and the DRC. And that was really barely talked about. Like, Ebola was just such a huge thing back in 2016 or so, and to have it come back up again and barely anyone really talk about it. There's just not that many articles, as many as there could have been in 2016, was really surprising. So it's really a sense of seeing where the media's priorities are, where people's priorities are, where they're consuming their news and their media outlets. So those are my thoughts. It's really interesting to see that play out.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, I completely agree with you on the media having to pick and choose what they want to cover. Does anybody else have any thoughts on this?
Honestly, I feel like social media and stuff is not covering COVID as much as it used to. Like, I feel like there has been a really big decline in the conversation about COVID and just generally like masks and social distancing and stuff. Oh my God, my nephew just walked in. Sorry. Yeah, so that, hold on. Okay, one sec. He's a toddler, so he's like definitely gonna make some noise. But anyways, yeah, I was just saying that like I feel like people are just really over it, and that shouldn't be the case. Like there should still be a lot more you know, like willpower to fight against COVID and to, you know, try to get things back to normal because cases are rising again.
Yes.
Sorry about that. But yeah, I don't know. I want to ask if like anyone else has felt like COVID cases or people just aren't talking about COVID as much.
I'll just give you my opinion on this. I feel like people are talking about COVID, but not necessarily in the right way. I feel like there's a lot of misinformation that's circulating, specifically because of social media. And I feel like the media, I mean, the news networks definitely have a role to play in, educating the public about COVID-19 in the right way. Does anyone else have anything to share?
Can y'all hear me? Is my mic still turned on?
We can hear you, Lane. Yeah, now we can hear you.
Okay, awesome. I joined on my phone. I was trying to figure out if I could. Doesn't matter. Point is, we were discussing this before the meeting actually started, when it was just Matt and Stephanie and I. We were saying, hey, COVID cases are, vaccinations are increasing, and that's really good. But the fact of the matter is, there's still 500,000 people who have died in the United States alone. I don't actually know the most current count. That's just the last really big buzzword number that I remember. And I think that the fact that I don't remember that sort of implies the other issue of once it stops being super, I don't want to say entertaining, but once we stop being hit with these really big numbers and all of the like videos of the COVID wings and everything like that, like once all of that goes away, we tend to stop caring about it as much. And I'm concerned that even though we still have this increased rate of vaccination that's only going up, and that will hopefully only continue to go up until most of the population, if not all the population, is vaccinated, I still feel like people are taking this as an excuse to just stop caring even more than they did so beforehand, which is an issue. But eventually we will get that herd immunity and then it won't matter, hopefully.
Yeah, I agree with that. Thank you for sharing that. And Stephanie in the chat says, I think that since a lot of people are getting vaccinated, they said they've started to think that they don't have to still wear masks or hang out with many groups of people, especially with how we are now hearing about a more deadly wave. Absolutely. Yeah.
Also, and if someone else would like to comment, they can definitely do so. But Shruti, if you want me to move on to the next slide, I can do that as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can move on to the next slide.
Awesome. Well, thanks for the discussion, y'all.
So we have an ethics related question. Your mother calls you and asks you to help with a major family decision. Your grandfather is 70 years old and he has been diagnosed with a condition that will kill him sometime in the next 5 years. We can have a procedure that will correct the disease and not leave him with any long-term problems, but the procedure is a 10% mortality rate. He wants to have the procedure, but your mother does not want him to. How do you mediate this situation? And you can think about this. Once again, there's no right or wrong answer. If you're not comfortable speaking, feel free to type it in the chat.
I feel like because this feels like a stacked question. And the question, or like the basic question they would answer at the end is, how much of a risk are you willing to take on this person's life? Because the standard, let's say standard life expectancy is 80 years. So he could live another 10 years, but he has a 10% chance of dying. Or he could live possibly 1 year, possibly 5 years, some less or sometime less than that. If he doesn't get the, if he doesn't get the procedure. Personally, I would say I would agree with him, but the question isn't really whether or not we agree with him, it's how you mediate the situation. And I think in my own terms, I would actually go through and I'd work out the math, or I'd say, oh, there's X% chance of him dying in the next 5 years versus 10 years, so on and so forth. Once I had that actually down pat and had convinced myself of that one of them was the correct choice, I would go and talk to my mother and I would say, okay, I don't want to say my mother, let's just say like generic mother, because there are some that's a whole other thing with personally, and of course we all have our personal interactions with our family members, but just if I were to go talk to, quote, my mother about it, I would say, hey, here's what the math has told me, and then here's how I'd probably try to bring some real world example into it, just so it would be a little bit easier for her to grasp. But I feel like eventually if she was being super duper, I don't want to say difficult, but if she was just very attached to the idea of not getting the procedure, then I would eventually have to say, hey, I understand that this is what you want, but he's also an adult and this is his choice to make.
Absolutely. I agree with that opinion. And as Lane just did, I think the important thing here is being able to reason your way through this. You have to look at all the different perspectives, all the different scenarios, realizing that you're interacting with an adult patient who, at this point of time, well, I'm not sure if it's been explicitly mentioned in this question, but if the patient is able to make his own decisions, and say your mother isn't really comfortable with the decision that the patient is making, you would have to accept the patient's decision. That being said, you would have to, reason your way through that 10% mortality rate, do some more exploring on that, and kind of talk to both your grandfather and your mother about this. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I also just wanted to say too, and thank you, Lane, for bringing in like a statistical approach to it, like very logical. Here are the numbers, here are the facts. Now you have to just reason through it and choose from that. It's also the fact of the matter is like patients are patients, they're humans. Sometimes a 10% mortality rate might be like the winning ticket for someone, or that might be crossing a boundary at some point. But like, what happens if that 10% mortality rate turns into a 20% or a 30%? Like, at what point would the patient say maybe the risks outweigh the benefits or something like that? And it's just hard to remedy that because it all is statistics. Like, you could still die from this procedure. The 10% is 10% for a reason. Like, there's still problems that you may face after going through it, or in this case, the grandfather would face going through it. So sometimes with patients, like, seeing numbers might not help entirely. Like, it's good to see them because it kind of helps bring some control to the situation where they can say, oh, I can logic my way through this. But sometimes I would say, like, if you were in the position of the physician taking care of the grandfather, instead of like, the fact is it's your grandfather instead, like asking him what they want to do in their life and like what goals that they have set. And I learned this from a geriatrician that I would work with, because when working with end-of-life care, working with geriatric patients like this, they have very specific goals, whether it's like make it until your daughter's wedding, or make it so that you're able to still cook your own food. And understanding whether the risks and even side effects, if I can call it side effects, of these procedures is just as important. Because if this specific procedure ends up making it so debilitating that your grandfather can no longer cook when that's like his whole life, that's also something to consider. Like, ultimately, it is like you could live 10 more years if you go through with it, you could live 5 more, but quality of life is a really important thing to be aware of in this situation. And I think asking him and your mother those questions is probably just as important.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for bringing up such insightful points, Stephanie. Quality of life is something that's super important to every patient. So yeah. Yeah, so I guess that's it for the slide.
All right, I will move on to our next one. Oh, this is me. Hi, everyone. So now that we've gotten through that, the last thing that we have to discuss with you is our seizure education class with UEMR. Everyone here should have gotten an email about it from the AMSA Gmail account, as well as through the pre-health UTD list. I thought that was super interesting. I don't know who did that on our officer board, but like, kudos to them. That was wonderful. So this class will be held next week. Next Wednesday, about the same time that we're having this meeting now. So from 6 to 6:45. I don't know if we're going to do any AMSA specific stuff during the meeting, but we will definitely be having this seizure education course. You can take a look at the emails that we sent to see more in detail course material. But if you're interested, you can sign up using this QR code, as well as the ones in the emails. In that case, I'll go ahead and move on to our next slide.
All right, and also another thing that you would have received in your emails as well is information that our applications for AMSA officers for next school year is now open. So if you are interested in being on our board and helping out with running events, things like that, having speakers on, you can fill out this application, and the QR code is right here, so is the link, and we'll be sure to provide these slides afterwards for y'all to refer to at a later time. But we would love to have you apply and have you on the board for next year. I think this is a really great opportunity for y'all, especially being pre-health. You might need a lot of like extracurricular and leadership opportunities on your resume, on your medical school applications, PA applications, things like that. So this is definitely a really great way to get some leadership in and learn new things. So feel free to scan that QR code or click on that link once you get the PowerPoint slides after the meeting, and just take 5 to 10 minutes to fill out the application. So yeah, it'll be open until April 7th.
Awesome. Thanks, Stephanie.
Okay, everyone, make sure that you are staying updated on our social media. We post a lot about our events and just what's going on. Here is our sign-in QR code, so please make sure that you do that for us. And then also join our new Slack. We're gonna be kind of shifting our gears to post a lot more stuff in that, and then just kind of getting to know members. Hopefully our Slack will be really active very, very soon. Yeah, so that's it. Thank you guys so much for coming. Lane, is that the last slide?
Yes, that is everything. Thanks, y'all.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.